this is a perfect example of not only different vocal colors, but also I've got chills. I just felt that. Kia ora and welcome. My name is Awish TV and I'm your vocal coach for today because we're gonna be taking a look at Andromeda with LELEK. I hope it's LELEK with Andromeda from Croatia, Eurovision Song Contest. I cannot wait to take a look at what she's up to with her vocal technique. Let's just get straight to seeing what is she doing with this wonderful voice? How can you create those sounds? And how is she actually making them? So let's just get straight to the video.
Svijeću, pitaj svoju baku, zašto je kćeri rađala u strahu, zašto su mnogi odabrali groblje, nisu naše majke iznjedrile roblje.
Oh my goodness me. Wow. Okay, obviously I don't speak Croatian. Okay, so we've got a thicker vocal fold contact there. We are up on the F sharp 4, which is well within the chest voice register there. So let's just watch that again.
Pališ svijeću, pitaj svoju baku, zašto je kćeri rađala u strahu, zašto su mnogi odabrali groblje, nisu naše majke iznjedrile roblje.
I love we have the chest voice there, but the vocal folds are just being pushed a little pushed a little bit more. They're just being pushed together a little bit more, so we're getting that pressurized sound. I love this. Let's go back. We're hearing this complain in the sound, and this is the thyroid tilt.
Pitaj svoju baku, zašto je kćeri rađala u strahu.
She's almost going into the thinner vocal folds there. I feel like they're going from thick to thin the whole time. And that's really the sign of a flexible voice, when we are able to make those changes from the chest voice into the head voice quite seamlessly without it making a big click or having quite a big tonal change there.
Što su mnogi odabrali groblje, nisu naše majke iznjedrile roblje. Mnoge su suze potekle ko rijeka, zašto se piše povijest iz početka, sinovi naši nisu podali.
This is perfect because we're seeing different vocal colors coming through here. So we've got a little bit of the lowering of the larynx and a little bit of nasality. And I'm not making fun of it. She's a fantastic singer. This is just the way that it would sound in my voice. But you can hear that darkening of the tone. We've almost got what you could call a darker timbre in the sound. We've still got quite a lot of thyroid tilt, though. I'll tell you what that is in the next little break. I do realize that I didn't explain that. Can you hear? So that is a whole host of different things. But it is a lot of this thyroid tilt. Now the thyroid is here, it's the Adam's apple where the vocal folds live. And so the vocal folds live like this within the thyroid cartilage. And when the thyroid tilts forward, that's what elongates the vocal folds. And it's the main difference between speaking and singing. So now she's just got a tiny bit of larynx lowering going on there to make that slightly darker tone going on there. It could also be, obviously I'm not her vocal coach, so I haven't heard her sing other things, but it could also be due to the size of the larynx, which would also make the sound dull, the timbre or color of the voice darker.
Njima sam tijelo, vodi me do zvijezda.
I've got chills. I just felt that. I've got chills. But I'm a bit of a sucker for some harmonies. Okay, I have to say, I love it when people sing together. Oh, okay. When we're here, we're seeing these open mouth shapes here, more of a trumpet shape. This is telling us, I don't know what that is, but this is telling us that we've gone into a chest voice sound further up in the range. You can also hear that there's a certain stability to the sound. We've got quite a straight tone. Okay, that could also be stylistic, but we start to hear almost like a cry out, which could be a little bit of belt, but we'll go into it. Let's just watch that again. Oh, it's just so wonderful. We sort of heard it almost like click into that belt going on there. Now, belt is when we actually have the cricoid cartilage, which sits under the thyroid cartilage. It rocks back to allow the vocal folds to be thicker than thick. Now, what we've just had that you can hear that cry in the sound. Now, without me knowing anything about what this means, this is what we need when we're going higher in the chest voice register. You can really see it on their face as well. So we're up on the B flat for and it's almost like they're crying out in this moment. Understood that word, Andromeda, and we heard a belt coming in there. Did you hear that one? I'm not sure who it is because they're so beautiful at blending here. That's the first time that one voice has really like popped out of the mix. Andromeda. We're hearing a very straight tone. It's all of a sudden quite brilliant in the tone. And that's really telling my ears that cricoid cartilage has tipped back. Those vocal folds are thicker than thick. And that's what creates a loud sound when we go into our belting. Not pushing, not supporting the sound, not pulling up from our dot, none of that. It's all about the vocal fold closure, creating a higher subglottic pressure here within the chest cavity. I love it. This sort of, and like, forgive me because I am honestly, I'm not a world music teacher. I am also not someone who teaches any types of chants or any type of, what's it called again? Some teachers work a lot with the idea of primal sound, but without me having worked with any type of primal sound, this is that sort of sound that you would hear someone if they were, I feel like there's sort of like a deep mourning, like a deep sadness in a chest voice sound when we're really singing with lots and lots of thyroid tilt. And that's going to help us, especially when we're intoning on the same, when we're intoning on the same notes, to make it sound less crap like I just did. We're using that thyroid tilt to make it sound more sung, but also to convey more of that emotion that I feel is coming across in this. Okay, we did actually. That could be low. Where are we? we're not that low. We're actually on the E flat for this, the E flat above middle C. Da, 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 da. So this actually might be quite a good song for female voices to work on their chest voice register, because I genuinely thought we were a lot lower. When we're too low in the range, that can kind of, or I say too low for people who are struggling with this part of their range anyway, this can really cause people to like press excessively. So I don't want you to think about pushing for volume. I want you to think about that you're getting the vibrations here on your fingers if you put your fingers on your larynx. But I actually have a 3-day Find Your Chest Voice challenge if this is something you're wanting to work on, down in the description below.
Jedna majka neće vam oprostit, na stolu srama zlato sađerdana.
So you hear, so she's using as well the pitching that, because when we're higher up in the range, we're wanting to allow the vocal folds to thin with that increase in the thyroid tilt. That's going to help us. You could call that more of a mixed voice. I would kind of call that we're taking our head, well, we're going into our head voice a little bit more there, but we're not quite going na 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 na. We're trying to stay in the same sort of color palette. This is getting very vague, isn't it, what I'm saying, Zoe? We're trying to keep the vocal folds basically from opening or thinning too much as we're going higher. But she is utilizing that pitch change to lighten up the sound up there.
Peru ruke krvlju naših rana.
This is a perfect example of not only different vocal colors, but also very, very different ways that we would sing the different parts or the voice colors. So we could say, and again, look, you can't call someone soprano, alto, tenor, none of that unless you actually heard them more than just in one song. But we will just say that she is singing the alto line, this first singer here. So we've got that lowered larynx. Usually the alto, and this is, okay, the alto line, so if you're not aware of what the voice types are or the voicings within, when you have multiple singers singing together, we have the alto line for females, which is the lowest female voice, and then we have the mezzo soprano, then we have the soprano 1 and soprano 2, and that really depends on what you're calling. So I used to sing in the New Zealand women's chorus, and so we actually had in barbershop, you actually call it, even in female singing, you would call it bass, baritone, tenor, alto, because you've got so many different voices in there. You do need to separate them out. So I used to sing bass and baritone, and you also have the alto, you know, you've got all of them in there. But when you're talking about just 4, I mean, I think there's like 5 or 6 female voices here. So we would then generally talk about either the female baritone, or we would say, let's just call it the alto, okay, without going too big. She's actually still up on the E flat 4 above middle C, so it's not particularly low. She's making it low by dropping the soft palate a little bit, making it a little bit like more nasal, but also by dropping the larynx, we can darken the tone. Sort of almost reminds me of a bit of like Gregorian chant. And then we have the whatever they're saying. She was in the first one, was in a little bit of the thinner vocal for or what we would call an Estel voice training sob. And the second one was in more of a speech quality or a chest voice. We're having a clear tone. We've got no vibrato, because vibrato actually in this situation, it wouldn't be stylistically appropriate, but it's also with so many voices starts to get very wishy-washy when you don't have the same rates of vibrato. And then we've gone, she's gone into more of a classical sound, dropping the larynx in order to help her to rather go easy, and brightening the sound by raising the lines. And with, and apologies, I'm like bastardizing this beautiful Croatian. Yeah, I can't read it, so therefore it makes no sense reading the lyrics. But she's dropped the larynx. We've got more of that classical tone, bringing them to and the thin vocal folds is also going to help to not bring out too much of sort of, I don't want to say like what makes our voice ours, but we are trying to, when we're singing with other singers, to blend with them. And then you hear, hey! And they go into the cricoid. Can you hear that? Tips back, and we're hearing that belt sound come into. Let's just watch that again. Yeah, going into more of that yell posture. Now, when I'm saying belts, when I'm saying yell posture, belt can also sound a little bit yelly, but it doesn't have to. Okay, in that moment, it kind of felt like a yell. But that is also probably stylistically what they're looking for. I kind of get this feeling it's about power. It's about that womanhood being to go, and so then that makes sense to call out to someone in that yell posture. Sometimes we can really hear it when singers kind of click into the belt because we're hearing that tonal difference between the chest voice, which would be without the cricoid tilt, and then they tilt the cricoid, and we hear that distinct volume change come in there and that ringing that occurs, but not with everybody. But you definitely do notice it on the spectrogram, for example. I'm trying to choose my words correctly because I'm trying to make it so that it makes sense to you, because it makes sense in my mind, but sometimes it's hard to get across without showing you in your own voices. So this is something that I do teach on a one-to-one basis, because it is really about looking at what your setup is and how your voice already sits, and honestly what is already in your natural voice. There are some cultures and out there who do speak in slightly louder voice qualities, and a lot of, some cultures belt the entire time when they're speaking to one another. So we would need to look at that, because maybe if you click into that, if you're part of one of those cultures or you speak one of those languages that tend to be a little bit louder in the way that they speak to one another, belting might actually be a lot easier for you than you think. But if you're someone that, say, I teach a lot of Germans, right? So if you're someone who comes from Germany, they don't belt at each other when they're speaking, and they tend to have a slightly lowered larynx position. So belting for a German native speaker can sometimes be quite challenging to raise the larynx to that position. So it is really about looking where your language is at. So you can apply for singing lessons down below if you want to sing something like this and not make it sound like you're just screaming at yourself or others. There's something there's something so wonderful about singing in the way that we can affect people's emotions without having any fucking idea what they are saying. I feel connected to this song, even though I've got absolutely no idea, and I love not knowing what they're talking about before anyone's like, look at the lyrics. I really don't care what the song is about. I go with the emotional, like the way that it is affecting me personally. If I was singing the song, I would look at the lyrics and get myself a coach to help me sing in Croatian. So let's go into this. I can sense that there are more voices coming in here. We do know on Eurovision there is an offstage choir or offstage backing vocalist. So I do kind of sense that there are other singers going on in the back. It suddenly gets quite full in this moment. So let's just go into it. Probably completely wrong, but that's what I'm sensing. We're in a chest voice quality. The microphones have gone a little bit further away. I'm feeling the energy increase in the bodies here. That's the beauty of belting, really, is that belt really only starts to kick in above that G4. All around there, especially for the female voice. We need it to be bright, and we need it to be in the upper part of the chest voice register, which is why those notes, around that C, it just starts to pop. And that's a reason why a lot of pop songs, or actually just a lot of songs in general, really start to have their kind of money notes, you can say, which what we call them when it starts to get like nice and loud. That's where they sort of start to ring and we start to get very excited about it. It's to do with the mirror neurons. So when someone else is cheering, which is sort of around that part, is where those formants start to raise, around where we start to cheer in the natural human voice. And so when someone else is cheering, we start to get excited as well. And so that's to do with the psychology of it. Beautiful. So, she's doing a little, I love that. It's like almost like a little bit of a yodel along with it, but she's really belting in that moment. We can see from the movement, she probably doesn't need you there, to be honest. She's a wonderful, you can hear very highly trained singer, but that trumpet shape in the mouth, and again, lots of thyroid too. We can sense the anguish in the sound, and that's what we need. Otherwise, honestly, you're going to feel like a strangled cat if you try and sing this. And okay, she again, not nitpicking at the pain points, but this is really it's not classic in the delivery, but really classic that she missed that last note, because I feel like she put too much effort or too much volume into that second crying section. Let's just go point it out. Still feels sung. Still feels sung. This one sounds yelled. Can you hear that? It starts to get a little bit spready, a little bit loud, and this is when we enter the territory of belting, but starting to press. We can sometimes do that when we look. This is a very important performance for them. This is this is huge for any singer. So of course we get a little bit excited, we get a little bit nervous, we start to kind of get away with our feelings. We're like, oh fuck, I need to get louder in this section, or I need to like up the ante. We can up the ante by doing more with our bodies without overemphasizing. There's so much going on. We do not need to get louder in this section. Can you hear? Andromeda. And she flipped into a falsetto there. Totally normal. If we do not have the right amount of pressure, Andromeda, and place the voice in the right. I'm like yelling at you because I'm like got my ears things because they're in there. So what we need to make sure is that we're placing the sound in the right placement. Andromeda. But it makes no sense talking about placement if you don't have a good vocal fold closure. I think, like, honestly, placement, I very rarely talk about it here because it's not going to help you if you do not know where your voice is already sitting or how your voice feels within your own body. Makes zero sense talking about placement. So I would want you to focus on making sure that you've got the vocal folds closed throughout that lower section of the range before you start singing up to that C sharp. We're up there, C sharp 5 now. So I don't even want you to think about that C sharp 5. Andromeda is also really lovely going into a thinner vocal fold, which is what she just did. We had quite a wide mouth position there. The tongue was going high. You don't have to open the mouth that wide, okay? Again, with professional singers, if it's not broke, don't try and fix it. So if that is how she's happy creating those sounds, not a problem. What a lot of singers that come into my studio, when they open their mouth that wide, I do ask them to kind of experiment with not opening quite as wide. What they find is it's actually easier to hit those notes because that's it's up there and see, it's still the C sharp. Not poo-pooing a C sharp, it's quite hard to continue singing up there in that belt register. In that belt voice quality as well. Belt is also a register and a voice quality. But what happens is if we over-open, it's going to push the larynx down. So I would like to work with singers like on a longer period of time, over a longer period of time, working on not quite opening up so much. It does really hinder those high notes. And you hear, oh, perfect, because you can say, ah, and the tongue went back down at the end. When we are belting, we must have a high tongue, okay? We must have a high tongue. If your tongue goes back down, firstly, if you are opening your mouth wide enough when you are belting, that you can really, unless you're on an R vowel, that you can see the back of your tongue, you're probably over opening. And I don't want the tongue to disappear downwards, which is why I have a lesson for you about the tongue position. It's in the description below because I have to teach you about the tongue position for singing. You can't go away dropping the tongue. She did that there. I'd be very interested to know if she could do it on any other vowel. That's good. So, I mean, look, okay, I get up on my soapbox a little bit, but if you are singing on an R vowel, we can get away with like, Andromeda! We can get away with a lot on an R vowel. But if you're going to do on an E, and you try and drop the tongue, oh God, this is going to hurt. If that's me dropping the tongue, firstly, it doesn't sound like an E anymore. And also it's extremely difficult, which works in isolated situations, but it'd be interesting to know. This is a beautiful sound. I'm just saying for you, if you are struggling. I get a lot of singers coming into the studio struggling with their belt. That's so beautiful because Andromeda, we can see that scooping and hollowing out of the tongue. Again, professional singers, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I would be looking for, definitely for the tongue, we want it high on the sides, but there is really no like one tongue position to rule them all when it comes to belting. But we do want a high tongue. We saw that with the sides, but the middle of the tongue has gone down. It's not really high enough for us to want to donate a little bit of the tongue to the larynx, which is where the back of the tongue needs to go back to allow the larynx to rise high enough without us kind of choking ourselves. So be interested to look at that like in an isolated situation. Fucking cool song. I don't give a shit if that wins or not. That was an awesome song. Love it. Love it. I'm not sure that will win Eurovision, but it just spoke to me. Anyway, I got all whipped up in the emotion of the song. Going up to the F5 there, which is like not very far under defying gravity, actually. We heard a little bit of a wobble. Now, see, that's what I was meaning about when we have the tongue position too low. We need to allow the larynx to raise for the next pitch as well. So I like to tell students that we need to have like the scaffolding in place. So I'm just changing the pitch. I'm not actually adjusting anything within the mouth in order to go further up in the range. Because once you have the setup of the belt, once you have that all like, oh yes, I've got my belt in place. Honestly, the sky's the limit. You're just going to find that the belting will just go and it won't be as hard as we kind of make it out to be. Yes, belting is exciting. Yes, belting is energetic. But the biggest mistake I see singers making is they make their belt, they make it seem too loud. It is a loud sound coming out of me. I'm trying to get this right in my head. It is a loud sound, but we don't try and make it be loud because it's the making it be loud. It's terrible English. I'm well aware of that. It's in us making the sound loud that causes us to go out of tune, to scratch, catch, and cough. And that's really not what we want in belts. So as I said, this needs to be looked at on there are some cultures where they do speak up there the entire time, okay? For example, in Australia, if they're talking to each other, yeah, g'day, mate. They're speaking often with a bit of cricoid tilt if they're up here, yeah? And it's to do, again, with those I'm going to get like Australians being like, no, they don't whatsoever, whatever. So yeah, it's to do with like what your natural setup is of the voice and what you're trying to achieve as well. So, oh my God, I cannot wait. I'm like in full Eurovision mode here. So let me know down in the comments what you want me to have a look at. And if you want to geek out about vocal technique, hit that subscribe button. I'd love to see you around here more often. Honestly, I just get a kick out of this. Feel like I've got to go and have a sit down and a cup of tea and get back to the next one. Whew. That was very exciting. This is going to be a tight one. I've listened to some really cool songs so far. Ooh! Anyway, happy singing. Ka kite anō.